You're either going to get killed or you're going to go to jail.
In the early 90s, Philadelphia was actually a mecca of drug distribution, primarily heroin and cocaine.
Price went down, the sales went up. It went faster. Jackie Wright was always a major player in the city. You know, sharp dude.
He took care of us. He loved his son.
If he wasn't around, nothing could happen.
He was shot in the head.
I thought that broke her. She's done.
People are assuming Jackie left me all this money. Nope. I got this child. I can't lay down and die. So we just resumed business as normal. Made a lot of money. A lot of money.
She took it over.
I cut my hair. I changed my look.
She saw who his clients were, sources of supply.
Thelma has always been about the business.
For me, it was about getting to another level.
People think the game is just all about us men. Thelma played at a real high level.
Jackie taught me this a long time ago. He said, as long as no bodies don't come up, we're cool. All of a sudden, shooting starts. I go to move, and the guy's standing there with the shotgun to my head.
You look at their life and you say, it's a short-lived life.
2 options, death or jail. That's it. It's nothing else.
On Gangsters, Philly's gangster queen, Thelma Wright. Philadelphia, 1986. Dr. J embarked on his farewell tour.
Irving, who will retire after the NBA playoffs, concludes with more than 30,000 points.
In the underworld of Philly, the junior black mafia opened for business, taking over from their elders.
8 shootings so far this year, and the normally peaceful streets of South Philadelphia are bracing for more violence.
And African-American women became targets of a psychopath in South Philly.
28-year-old Harrison Grant admitted luring women into his tenement apartment by offering them drugs. 6 bodies were found on Friday.
In the heat of the summer, one of the hottest on record, one gangster fell into the game. Her name was Thelma Wright.
The game is like any other business. You can run it like any other business, just like corporate America. You can run it the same way. But in any business, I think that we women will run into problems that sometimes men don't. As long as people are not getting killed, you're fine.
Thelma Wright was very unlike most drug traffickers.
Thelma was down to earth, very low key, don't show off nothing.
Very religious, very athletic. She did not come from a disadvantaged background, one of poverty, one of abuse.
If you just walked up to her, you wouldn't think nothing of it. Nothing extraordinary about it.
Her status is a testament to how wise and calculating one could be in a man's game.
The book on Thelma Wright cannot be judged by the cover. By day, she was a bi-coastal businesswoman. Under the cover of darkness, she was a queen pin with a thirst for the high life.
Made a lot of money. A lot of money, I can tell you, made a lot of money. You know in The Godfather when they say it's a lot of money in that white powder? It was a lot of money in that.
But with that money came a heavy price. For Thelma, it all began with a man. The year was 1977. His name was Jackie Wright.
I heard of Jackie before I met Jackie.
10 years her senior, he'd been a major player in Philadelphia's black mafia.
The Black Mafia were a group of individuals that started to control the drug trade in Philadelphia. They were a very ruthless street gang. They killed police officers, and they literally had no regard for human life.
By the time I came along, the Black Mafia wasn't around anymore. I was told that Jackie had Black Mafia Association. I didn't know about any kind of gangs activity doing drugs, but there were individuals. People were just doing their thing.
Jackie Wright's thing was selling drugs, heroin, in weight by the kilo, and spending his money in the hood.
He was a top-ranking member of the Black Mafia in Philadelphia, one of the more significant heroin traffickers in the area.
Thelma was a secretary at a medical supply company.
I had been out of high school maybe about a year and a half, and I was walking home from work one day and on Broad Street, and I saw this big, pretty red convertible Eldorado that he drove. Convertible. It was beautiful. I see him turning the corner, and our eyes, we looked, at each other, but I turned, he turned the corner and kept going.
She got a formal introduction later that summer.
He was much older, and I just couldn't imagine, I'm young, naive, like, why would he want to go take me out?
He was a bad boy. Girls like bad boys. He was always dressed immaculately. He was always so stylish. Beautiful jewelry, beautiful smile.
Jackie Wright was always a major player in the city. Sharp dude. In the game, he's somebody that demands respect.
I was always an adventurous girl. He was this guy that people talked about in a positive way, but also a force to be reckoned with.
Sharp-dressed and extravagant. They were dating by year's end.
We went out and we rode like half the night, just in his car, just riding and talking. That was the start of our life together.
He flew her to California for a week in the sunshine.
I'd never been to California, and I would say around then is when I knew that I was in love with him.
But Jackie was there on business.
He had a source in California, which was considered his connect. And that's who he would obtain the drugs from. And then he would supply individuals here in Philadelphia.
Thelma returned home with her eyes wide open about her man's business.
This North Philadelphia neighborhood is known as a hangout, a place where addicts went to shoot up intravenous drugs.
At the time, I was 21 years old, and I'm just going with this. I don't know where it's going. I never felt as though he would do anything to put me in harm's way. I felt as though he would protect me.
She was wrong. Jackie had two sides. In 1979, she scolded the gangster for working on her birthday.
He's getting high at the time. And I look at him, I'm angry. He knew that look like, I'm angry, and my head's kind of tilted, and that was a no-no. You're not going to do you don't do the bob and head thing. I'm walking away from him, but I turn around and I look back. I see the gun.
He shot her in the leg.
I fall down and I'm screaming and hollering, and everybody just scatters.
Someone called me. They told me that Jackie had shot her, and I'm like, Jackie shot her? And my heart dropped because I thought that she was dead.
I'm in the emergency room, and these two white guys are like looking over top of me. And they're detectives. And they're asking me what happened. And I'm like, I don't know. And they said, do you know who shot you? And I said, no, I don't know.
Jackie was so distraught over what he'd done, he called Thelma's parents personally.
Jackie called my mother, and he said, Miss Brown, I just shot your daughter. And she said, you did? And he said, yeah. And she said, is she alive? And he said, yes. He said, I shot her in the leg. I didn't mean to shoot her. He said, but I just shot 2 straight. When you're crazy in love, you know, you'll believe what you think you need to believe.
They allowed him to make amends. Later that year, Jackie bought a house across the river in New Jersey. They had a son, Jakeem, in 1982, and were married the following year.
My father and my mother loved him. They didn't love him for me, but they loved him. They grew to love him dearly. He took care of us, and that was it.
Flush with money, they bought a furniture store.
It was called The Wright Place, after our last name. And it was basically nice, affordable furniture for the community. He knew that it was something that could be lucrative for me, and I guess it was a way of keeping me busy.
They had created the perfect suburban life.
Love for mom and dad.
And then the game came calling. December 1985. One of Jackie's associates is murdered.
There were things going on that I didn't know about. I didn't fully understand, and I know he wasn't coming home a lot. Then he does come home a day before the funeral, and it's like a scene out of Scarface. Like, you know, he's high and he's paranoid and he's talking crazy, you know.
She found herself with a 2-year-old to protect from the unknown.
I would get my gun and I would sit in my son's room in the window ledge until I would just fall off, you know, for fear that someone would come and try to kill me and my son.
Jackie called one night after Christmas to tell her to pack quickly and not ask questions. He sent a friend to the house with tickets to California.
And that's what happened. On January 3rd, Jack and I flew to LA. We went out there with just 2 suitcases. I remember telling my parents before I left, I said, I'm never coming back.
She wouldn't have that choice.
We go to the nearest police station to tell them my husband's missing. The officer tells me that he's in the house. And I remember just like screaming. It was my worst nightmare ever.
In 1986, Thelma Wright moved from Philadelphia to Los Angeles with her young son to try to start over. Her husband was a drug dealer named Jackie Wright, who sent her west after one frantic phone call and stayed behind in Philly. With his money, she bought a townhouse, started a legitimate business selling designer sweatsuits, and tried to start over without him.
I cut my hair, I changed my look, I started gaining weight. You know, I'm happy. I felt like I'm here and I'm safe. And my priority was to make sure that my child was safe.
Within months, Wright, a black mafia member and known player in the game, wanted her back.
He said that everything was okay and that I could come home. And I said, I am home. I got to a point where things that I had gone through in my marriage, I didn't want to go through that again.
But Jackie wore her down. He visited often. He wanted another chance. She agreed to come back to Philly for her birthday that August and tried calling him the day before.
I had talked to Jackie early that morning, and I started calling again, looking for him later that day. And something just came over me. It was like a strange, eerie kind of a feeling, but a bad feeling. I could not explain. And I said to my girlfriend, I said, something doesn't feel right.
When he didn't call her back the next day, she caught the first flight to Philly.
We go to the nearest police station. I tell them my name and that my husband was missing.
She also gave them a suspect, a man named Dennis Rogers.
Jackie told me about how he had given this guy, Dennis Rogers, a key of cocaine. And Dennis owed him $25,000, and he was upset because he couldn't find Dennis.
That information led detectives to a housing project in Germantown, a tough borough on the northwest side of Philly. Thelma rode with them.
The police officer asked me if I had a picture, and I kept in my wallet a picture of me and him. Gave him the picture, and they told me to wait here. Went back to the house, and an officer came back, and he came to my side of the car, and he said, "Ma'am, he's in the house, and he's dead." And I started to scream, or I thought I was screaming. My mouth was open, but I don't remember hearing anything.
An apparent execution-style killing.
The body so badly decomposed that it could take days to determine cause of death.
When I found out that he had been killed, I didn't believe it. I think even years later, I still, you couldn't kill him. Not him.
Shot in the back of the head, the lower part of his head, and he almost died instantly.
Just tragic. It's bad. It's just bad.
Police believe a rival gang, the 20th and Carpenter Street gang, put a hit out on Jackie Wright's life. Retaliation for the killing of another drug dealer that he allegedly ordered.
They found him in the house wrapped up in the carpet. It was like a suicide act on a guy who did it. That was like killing your own self to do something like that. That was like unheard of. You don't touch a person like that.
It's the summer of 1986. It's extremely hot. And they said, well, we want to let you know that you're not going to be able to come here to identify him because the body was too badly decomposed. But I need to see him. I'm crying and I'm falling all down and, because what else do you do?
She could have turned away, returned to L.A. and her new life. Instead, she took over. She got in the game by leading a double life. Businesswoman by day, gangster by night. In truth, there are always two sides to Thelma.
My father used to say if she had been a boy, she would have been in jail. That's just how she was. She looked out for us. We had a problem with someone on the street. She looked out for us. Thelma's loving. She's loyal. She can be bossy. She could be your best friend. She could be your worst nightmare.
She was the oldest girl of Lacey and Bootsy Brown. He was a supervisor at Philadelphia Electric. She raised 6 children. Thelma came after the 2 boys.
I watched the way my brothers did things, and I felt like anything my brothers did that I should be able to do.
Thelma was a pain to me and my brother. She was a spoiled brat to no end.
Thelma was Daddy's little girl. Thelma got away with lots of things.
He was all athletes. My father refereed college, high school basketball. My mother ran her own girls' basketball league, which my sisters, all 3 of them, played in.
Determined to keep his 6 kids out of trouble, Thelma's father converted to Catholicism in order to send his kids to parochial school.
I always wanted to get married, maybe have 2 children, have a nice home, those kind of things.
Her upbringing was very good, but when she was a teenager, she started to see these individuals that were dressed nicely, had nice jewelry, drove, beautiful cars.
In my neighborhood, the brothers was running things, and you knew who was getting all the money. You seen who was driving the Cadillacs, and you seen who had the fur coats, you seen who had all the nice things.
The suits and the hats and the shoes, and just overnight, and you ain't working, so it don't take much to put 2 and 2 together. You're getting this from somewhere. You're doing something.
Thelma's education didn't start with the drug game. It started with numbers.
Back then, pretty much everybody played numbers.
You know, gambling, numbers.
They didn't have like the lottery today. So, yeah, that was big business. There was a lot of money made in the numbers game.
In Philadelphia, the mob ran the numbers game before drugs became the business. A runner would go through the neighborhood, collecting money and 3-digit plays. These plays were guesses as to the total amount of money bet on win, place, and show at the racetrack each day. In order to win, their play would have to match the last digit of each total.
Let's use like 310. You could play the lead, which was the first number, the 3. You could play the end number, the O, or you could box the whole number. If the number came out like 031, you'd hit it for a percentage based on what you spent. So that's basically how the number system worked.
Thelma was good at numbers. And when her husband was killed, she took a hard look at how the numbers came up.
If you had an ounce of heroin and you put a cut on an ounce of heroin, you could cut that 1 ounce 14 times. So let's just say if you spent $1,000, you made $14,000 off of that $1,000. So that's a lot of money.
I thought she was dipping in that. It was more like she took it over.
It was about survival. It was about, getting to another level.
August 1987, Philadelphia police began a citywide manhunt for a serial killer. His target was young African-American women. His territory was Northwest Philly, where Thelma grew up. By the time detectives caught the man, known nationwide as the Corpse Collector, Thelma Wright was no longer in line to be a victim. She was a full-fledged gangster.
Thelma ran a very large organization that operated from Philadelphia but had tentacles throughout the United States. She was poisoning a lot of the population there with heroin and cocaine.
She wanted a different life for herself and her son.
August 9th, 1986. The body of Thelma Wright's husband was found rolled up in a rug. The black mafia leader had been shot in the head and left for dead.
In between his death and the funeral, one of his people comes to me to see me, and he brings me a bag, and he said, "This is what was owed." He says, "Well, what are we going to do?" And I'm looking at him like, "What do you mean, what are we going to do?" He says, "Well, we got to keep living. We got to keep going."
Jackie Wright had more than a decade in the game. He had clients and connections and a crew of loyal workers.
My mind is racing. I got this child. I can't lay down and die. I got to figure it out. I got to keep going.
After she put Jackie in the ground, she called a meeting with his crew.
They explained to me, how we can do this and I would be safe. And they would make sure that everything was okay. I said, okay, fine. So that's what I did, and that's how I did it. I knew people that he was doing business with, not all of them, but I knew some of them. We just resumed business as normal.
She saw how he conducted business, who his clients were, sources of supply. So it was a very easy move for Thelma to step into that role.
She flew back to California with a purpose and paid a call to her late husband's main connection, a woman he called Auntie.
She was Jackie's connect, and then she became my connect, but she was also like a surrogate mother to me, and she was like a grandmother to my son.
If you looked at her, if you had seen her and known her, there's no way on God's green earth you would have thought she had anything to do with anything.
Just a kind, quiet lady, nondescript. You'd never know, what she was doing. That's the way she kept herself.
Auntie supplied Thelma with kilos of heroin. Thelma, in turn, supplied her crew.
They would make sure that the product got where it needed to go. We'd get the money, and that was it. I didn't have a corner. I didn't do any of that. You know, it was strictly weight. I dealt strictly in weight, and you had to have the money. And then if you didn't have the money, I didn't do business with you. And I didn't do business with people that I wasn't comfortable with.
With Jakeem to raise and a legitimate business to run, she embarked on a double life.
Thelma has always been a businesswoman. No matter what it is that she did, she's always about the business. So whatever she decided to put her mind to, guess what? Got done.
I didn't carry a weapon, but there were people that I could call if I had a problem. And people knew that.
Everybody knew that her late husband was connected to the Black Mafia.
Most people think the game is just all about us men, you know what I mean? From my knowledge, not too many women played at a very high level. Thelma ventured out pretty far, pretty deep, and she played at a real high level.
I have a home here on the East Coast, but I also had a home on the West Coast. I mean, I had Laker tickets, I had Sixer tickets. I enjoyed life.
When it became easy, she began to cast the net even wider for customers.
You know, back then in the 80s, a lot of people went to fights, especially when you were getting money. You went to the fight game.
In Las Vegas, for a heavyweight bout, she met a man she called D.
We started seeing each other, and come to find out, he was in the same business.
And we started going out. And she told me what she was doing. And that's when me and Thelma started doing business.
I was doing heroin, he was doing cocaine. And we started talking, and he said, well, you know, maybe we can make some money.
It all came too easy. She got too comfortable too quick.
You think when you're young, everything's going to last forever. When things started to go bad, they went bad very quickly, like 1, 2, 3.
In 1986, Thelma Wright became a gangster after her husband was killed in cold blood. She took his connections for pure kilograms of heroin, his clients, and his crew of workers, and she expanded the business.
Jackie taught me this a long time ago. He said, as long as no bodies don't come up, we're cool. You know, as long as people are not getting killed, you know, people are not being shot and kidnapped and those kind of things, you're fine.
1 year after Jackie Wright's murder, she met a new man on a fight night in Vegas. She called him D, and he was also in the game, but with a different clientele.
He was in the cocaine business.
Thelma had seen the rise of crack in Philadelphia with Jackie.
She named the price that she was getting, say $40,000 as an example. Then I told her, well, I can beat that price. I said, well, I'll give it to you at $30,000.
I talked to my people in LA, you know, but they couldn't beat his price, of course, because he's giving me a better price because we're seeing each other.
With the crack invasion, cocaine was the now drug. As the volume of the product on the streets skyrocketed, prices tumbled.
The beginning started off, it was like $60,000 per key.
Little is being done to stop this disease-like spread of the cocaine economy.
The sales went up. It went faster. More females started turning their boyfriends on to her. The sales went from 50,000 to 13,000. They dropped that for now.
So that's how I started getting into both. So now we're doing the cocaine and the heroin. We started making a lot of money together.
Thelma became bi-coastal for the business. With her heroin connect, a woman known as Auntie in Los Angeles, her new cocaine connect in Oakland, Thelma devised a way to quickly get the drugs to her clients back east in Philadelphia and New Jersey.
She would ship drugs throughout the country by using the mail service, Federal Express.
We would use the Postal Service for the packages. Most of the time we would use FedEx for the money because the FedEx you could count on to get there the very next day by the time they said. The Postal Service, you couldn't depend on that with the money.
I didn't know about what she was putting, especially through the Postal Service since I worked there.
Her brother, Skip Brown, had worked there all his adult life.
That kind of shocked me a little bit, and the way that she was dealing with it, that shocked me. The way the Post Office Service used to do it, they'll ask you what's in there, perishable, books, whatever the case may be, and you tell them what it is, and they just stamp it on the box. They really don't go through it. They just stamp it and go on about business.
Her workers were on standby for packages.
They would use fictitious names. A lot of times they were shipped to addresses that were fictitious, but, they had individuals that, were ready to pick up the packages in those areas.
They would put her cut of the profits in a FedEx envelope for the next business day. With this scheme, she built her empire. She expanded her clothing store in Los Angeles and started producing comedy shows back in Philadelphia.
We're bringing in Bill Bellamy, Joe Torre. We had comedians come in from all over, and it was doing very well.
So was Philly's gangster queen, clearing about $400,000 profit every month.
I had the house in Los Angeles. I had the home here in Willingboro, New Jersey. I had the two Benzes, the convertible 560 SL and the 190E. Had that. And then back here, I had a Volvo wagon that had the little seat in the back, and my son would sit in the little seat in the back.
Growing up as a kid, it was a lot of fun. I was an only child, but I never really needed anything.
Jack was the rich kid in the family. To see him going to school by limo every day, he was living the life.
I guess we were like the celebrity. She was a celebrity then. Celebrity style party.
I did a lot of business with record labels and entertainers and things like that. It was a situation where if somebody said, let's go to Egypt this weekend, we go to, I never knew what I was going to do.
It got to be real fun. Then it got a little bit serious. I was talking to her son, and then he was looking for a father figure, and then he asked me, would I be his father? And I said, yes. Then it got real serious, and I think I started slowly backing out the relationship.
So, Dee and I stopped seeing each other.
They maintained the business relationship and the steady flow of cocaine. By the late 80s, Thelma was single again. She began to return to her past. She spent more time back home in Philly.
I'm back in Philly at a basketball game, Sixers game, and my girlfriend and I see this person, and he comes over and he starts talking to me and introduces himself. He tells me his name is Aaron.
Aaron Jones, a.k.a. Jay, was practically a criminal descendant of Thelma's slain husband. Authorities described him as the kingpin of a new criminal enterprise in Philadelphia, known as JBM, the Junior Black Mafia.
The system says Junior Black Mafia. The guys say just blowing money. They were young guys, a few years younger than me, and they were really taking over the drug game.
Thelma says Jay had no idea they were in competition for clients, addicts, and users in Philadelphia.
He knew nothing about what I was doing. He thought that my husband left me pretty comfortable.
Entering a relationship with Jay made her return to the place of fear that marked her marriage. Paranoia about the drug-fueled violence that is always just a heartbeat away in the game.
I didn't get scared until an incident happened in 91, and that's when everything happened in 91.
July 11th, 1991. Thelma and several of her friends go to a popular late-night club called Studio West.
It was really a rough area. And when we get there, people are like all over the streets.
You can't take nobody in the street lightly. You know, a 10-year-old is a threat if he come at you the right way.
And then all of a sudden, shooting starts. And someone grabs me and pulls me down behind a trash dumpster. And I go to move, and the guy's standing there with the shotgun to my head. I don't see his face. I just see the two barrels.
In July of 1991, Thelma Wright was caught in the crossfire of a gangland shootout. She was close enough to see the barrel of the gun, but escaped harm when the shooter fled the scene.
Well, our friend Naeem had gotten killed that night.
Naeem was also known as James Madison, a convicted drug dealer and member of the Junior Black Mafia. He'd been released from prison just 6 months before. He was shot in the back as well as the face.
I'm very close. I've seen my friend get killed.
Less than 2 weeks later, she dodged a bullet of another kind. One of her longtime clients, a man known as Fats, was picked up by police.
The rule of thumb was never call on the package. It's not a legitimate package. If it doesn't come, just let me know. We'll stand behind it. We'll get you another one.
Fats decided to call the post office after his package failed to arrive.
The guy kept calling. Okay, so now somebody got a wake-up call. Well, what's so important about this box?
Finally, when he gets the package, the feds deliver the package, and he gets arrested. Now, we're aware that the postal inspectors are probably going to backtrack and find out that we've been sending these packages.
She became frightened of every phone call and was constantly looking over her shoulder. Within weeks, her West Coast connection, her oldest friend in the game, disappeared.
I hadn't heard from Auntie, and someone said, "You didn't know?" And I said, "No, what?" And they said she was killed a few weeks ago. She took a ride, just like Jackie. She took a ride with someone, someplace, and they went in a house, and they were all killed. Everyone in the house was killed, execution style.
Auntie took a toll on her. You could see it. They basically broke her. Yeah. I thought that was the last straw.
That same year, 1991, her old friend Dee in Oakland was taken down by federal agents.
I had just took my grandson to school. I thought I was going to get killed. The way they surrounded the car.
He ended up doing 6.5 years behind bars.
It made me realize that this is not for me. This is not the game to be in. This is something that I definitely need to get away from, and quickly, because what is my son going to do? If something happens to me, what's going to happen to him?
After a while, you realize, oh, no. Especially when you know that you're doing wrong. You know, you just cannot continue to ride it out to the end.
Because I was going to lose, and lose badly. So that's what I did. I just walked away from it to never look back.
She decided it was getting too risky. She had a child that she was concerned about. So she turned her life around.
By the end of 1991, Thelma Wright was out of the game for good.
The luckiest girl in the world as far as that is concerned.
In 1995, authorities finally caught up with Dennis Rogers, the main suspect in the killing of Jackie Wright. He was convicted of first-degree murder and put away for life.
He destroyed our lives, and, you know, he took my husband from my son. But I knew that he was on drugs. He was afraid of my husband. And a scared man is a dangerous man. And so I realized that in order for me to go on with my life, I had to forgive him and leave him in God's hands.
Thelma hasn't turned her back on her past, just on the dark side of her double life.
We were with each other when good things happened. We were with each other when bad things happened. And now we're just trying to live our lives.
In 2009, she went to work for a nonprofit organization, managing properties for women dealing with addiction and mental health issues.
I am a mother to some. I am grandmother to the kids. It gives me an opportunity to see some of the destruction behind things that I'd done.
Keep in mind that she was distributing heroin and other drugs. And those drugs cause overdose deaths. So it was similar, in my opinion, to pulling the trigger and shooting somebody.
They're really excited about it. I just hope that it's been a way for me to give back. We appreciate it. And to, you know, it's to see the other side.
In 2011, Thelma decided to finally come clean to her son and her family with the publication of her memoir, With Eyes from Both Sides.
Some stuff I didn't want to read, she explained to me what she did, which I was surprised, but it made sense once I started to backtrack how we lived.
The hardest part was to talk with my son. That was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life.
It's pretty crazy to know that, like, my mother and father were both, you know, in the drug game, like, at the height of drugs, so to speak, in America. I was just happy to know the story, like the true story.
When I go around and I speak to people, I'm letting them know that you need to stay away from this game. You're not going to win. It is a no-win. 2 options, death or jail. That's it. It's nothing else.
You can count people on one hand that've done that. She's one lucky sister.
Looking back on it now, I did what I did to survive, to take care of myself and my son. Would I do it again? No. No, absolutely not.